Hello and welcome back to the game room, or should I say movie room. And you know what I love? Movies. You know what I also like talking about? Movies. And it seems like a lot of people these days who cover movies seem to hate them, and especially the people who watch them. Well, that's not me, and that's not the 4,603 of you beautiful people taking a look at this video here today. Yes, it is April 1st. We are having a little fun this week. Obviously, thank you guys so much. We have gone up another milestone past 4,600. Let's go ahead and ruin that momentum with a algorithm breaking video like this. But I wanted to have a little fun today. I love action movies especially. And to be honest with you guys, I can't really name a good action movie that's come out in the last decade. However, what we're taking a look at today are movies from the prior 4 decades, all the way from the 80s, the 90s, 2000s, and even a little 2010s recognition. So if that sounds interesting to you, let's check it out.
There's a lot of movies out there, some of which you've never even heard of. That's where I come in. My name's Luke. I've been watching films since the age of 2, and I have no life.
This is my movie room.
Alright, so bear in mind, movies are a little bit harder to get away with to show on screen than video game footage, so I'm going to try to have some trailer footage or something in the background of this video, but if it just completely gets my channel knocked every time, I'm just going to have a poster. But let's get started with the first movie I want to talk about here, which was basically, in my opinion, one of the greatest action movies that no one really talks about. Everyone knows about John McTiernan making Predator, making Die Hard, and then The Hunt for Red October. It's one of the greatest trilogy of movies by a director that really isn't known for anything else. But there's another director out there that I really like named Peter Hyams. So he's the guy who directed Time Cop, and he had not an equally impressive run, don't get me wrong, but a very solid run where he had Time Cop, and then the movie we're talking about, Sudden Death, as well as there was Relic, which is a very fun horror action movie, and then to round it off, it's End of Days. Not my favorite Arnold movie, but still decent enough, especially compared to what we get nowadays. But the movie I want to talk about is Sudden Death. Now, Sudden Death is through and through a Die Hard clone. This happened a lot post Die Hard. You would have Die Hard on a boat, Die Hard on a bus, Die Hard in a plane, Die Hard on the president's plane. Well, this one really upped the stakes. This is Die Hard at the Stanley Cup Finals with the vice president in attendance. And obviously the name Sudden Death. Slight spoilers, you know, I'm not going to get too much into the plot of these, but obviously it's a movie about hockey. If you know what Sudden Death is, that's where the game goes into sudden death overtime. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge, that might be a plot device in this movie. Jean-Claude Van Damme is one of my favorite action stars. He was always the guy who I related to more just because I enjoyed, you know, you got Arnold, Stallone, these big muscle-bound guys, but Jean-Claude had to use a lot more skill in my opinion. It got me into Taekwondo as a kid. And in this movie, which was the follow-up after Time Cop. So Time Cop was probably his best released in the theaters movie, and then it followed up with this one, which I thought was very, very good, though over the years, it's kind of gotten lost by the wayside. He's a father of 2 kids. He has some trauma where he lost a little girl in a fire, and then so he's taking his kids to watch the Stanley Cup Finals, and then one of his daughters gets kidnapped by the terrorists, ends up in the box with the vice president, and Powers Booth does his best Alan Rickman impression. He's a very charismatic villain in this. Overall, it is ridiculous. There are scenarios where Jean-Claude gets on the ice. There's him fighting a mascot. But it really does justice to that Die Hard formula. You don't get to know the terrorists as well. Once again, Powers Booth is no Alan Rickman, but as far as the genre within a genre of Die Hard clones, this one's probably one of the best ones, and in my opinion has enough to stand on its own merit. So if you've never seen Sudden Death, If you enjoy Jean-Claude movies, this one's probably his last best movie that come out in the theaters. After this one, I want to say it was Double Team with Dennis Rodman, which was and then Knockoff with Rob Schneider, which I did not enjoy that much in the theaters at the time. I've watched it since then, and it's not so bad. But then after that, all this stuff started going straight to DVD. All right, the next one I want to talk about, which I didn't even know I didn't have on DVD, so I really should go ahead and pick that up. But this is probably one of the, as far as Arnold's run in the 80s, this is the most forgotten one of his movies, I would say, to the point of when I would watch, when I would go to the movie store back in the day, for you kids out there, you could actually go to a rental store, rent a movie, and that's kind of how you knew if things existed or not. So, you know, you might see something on TV and then go to the rental store because you wanted to rent it because like, oh, that 20 minutes I saw was good, let's actually watch the whole thing. Well, this happened. I saw a movie where Arnold was in a pink Cadillac. There was a gunfight, and then it was done. And I could never find out what this movie was. This was before the internet. And finally, I managed to track down that there is a movie called Raw Deal. And I still have this thing on VHS. And it's not even one of the nice VHSs. This is crazy clamshell. I could not find this anywhere. And this is a movie that came out in 1986. Can you believe it? It came out between like Commando, Running Man, Predator. It's kind of his forgotten film in my opinion. And in it, with a lot of Arnold movies, especially, you would see actors do their genre. So, you know, you'll have the the sci-fi movie, the jungle movie, all the different tropes for action stars. This was Arnold's mafia movie, and it's by far not the best by any means. But if you're looking for a fun time where Arnold is going through a seedy world of corrupt cops and corrupt this and that, and having to go undercover and have slicked back hair and a huge body count. I mean, one of the things when this came out is it was compared to Stallone's release of a movie called Cobra, which is another good one that's kind of one of those underrated movies that's very, very good. But Raw Deal is that movie with the pink Cadillac. Now, I don't really remember anything else from it, which is a lot with these. I haven't seen a lot of these movies in 5-10 years, even plus. But a good, dumb, fun time. And it does have a nice, satisfying wrap-up at the end. You know what's going to happen with these things, but it's just fun to see Arnold go and, play with toys in a different setting that you don't typically see, especially when he's, peak Arnold, that late 80s Arnold that just is so damn imposing. So that's one. I got to go find the damn DVD of it. I didn't know I didn't have it on DVD. All right. Now, here's one a little bit different. We're jumping to the 90s now. Now, Kurt Russell is low-key one of the best action stars who doesn't really ever get brought up into these discussions. But he's just, he's so versatile. You have Snake Plissken, you have him in The Thing, various other, all the stuff he's in. But one of the ones that people do not really talk about, which might lean more on an action thriller, this is a late 90s release called Breakdown, and it's starring him. The cast is pretty solid. The main villain, I can't remember, it's like JT something, but he's the guy who's in Pleasantville, and he's in Miracle on 34th Street, the remake. He always plays kind of a jerk, and in this movie, it's about Kurt Russell and his wife. Their car breaks down. Yes, simple titles. It breaks down in front of a small town, and they have to get the car fixed. Kurt goes off to, the bathroom or something, and his wife disappears, and then it's everyone in the town is like, what do you mean you never had a wife? And they have footage, like there's this whole conspiracy about, was the wife ever there or was it not? What's going on? Kurt's going crazy, and he has to uncover this mystery in this town that's constantly fighting him, trying to get him out of there, call him nuts, having proof to show that he's nuts. And it, obviously the wife does exist, or does she? No, she does exist. And it's just about him going through and having to figure out how to do this, why it's happening, and how to get in it. And just, it's very cleverly paced to the point where, it's one of those things where you never doubt that the wife wasn't real, but it is so it's more the fact that, wow, this is very convincing that if this wasn't a movie, if I wasn't watching this, I could see how something like this might work, which is always where these kind of get you, where you can see the through line of the logic behind it and the writing behind it is very sound. And it's just a solid performance. Kurt Russell's great in it. I can't think of another, it might be one of his last best, Kurt Russell movies before, he started getting too old for this kind of stuff. That's a good one. I highly recommend checking it out. Now, another movie that I really remembered and loved. I know this is not a great movie, but I really, really liked this movie as a kid. And it's a John Woo film, which I didn't know what that meant at the time. And John Woo fans might say, yeah, this one's not great, but I love it. And that is Broken Arrow. And Broken Arrow stars John Travolta and Christian Slater. It's the first movie I saw both of them in. And famously, John Travolta's career in the mid-90s was kind of toast until Quentin Tarantino, who kind of developed a knack for this, would take these aging stars off the dust heap, get them into a starring role, and then it revitalizes their career. The whole thing that started that trend really was John Travolta in Pulp Fiction, and then after that he got Broken Arrow, he did Michael, he did Hairspray. Like, his career completely had a giant uptick because of Pulp Fiction, but this was the next movie he did, which may have been in the can before Pulp Fiction came out, but I loved the hell out of it. Christian Slater is one of those actors that kind of never really took off, but always provided a decent enough everyman leading man that you could get behind. There's another movie he's in called Hard Rain that's also pretty damn good. But he's a perfect vehicle for these kind of movies where the villain is far more interesting, and that's what John Travolta is. John Travolta is kind of doing his best Joker impression. He's crazy. 1 second he's laughing, 1 second he's murdering someone. He kills off his own guys. Like, just a really fun movie. And the plot of it is these two are fighter pilots, and for some reason John Travolta is going rogue. They steal 2 nuclear warheads, and then there's this entire group of mercenaries that is trying to hold the United States government hostage to pay for ransom so that they don't set off these nuclear bombs in the country. And so Christian Slater, he gets ejected by John Travolta. You think he's dead. He has to work with, of course, the female lead, and they're trying to solve it on their side. And then John Travolta and this, and they keep interacting. That they eventually they come to blows a few times. It's a smart movie where it constantly has there's a fight, a mid-fight, and then a big fight. So it's not one of those things where, they never interact. In this movie, they constantly interact. Maybe a little unbelievably so, they constantly interact. But it is a fun movie. It takes place in the desert. It's an interesting setting. Howie Long, the football broadcaster and former Oakland Raider, is a prominent role in this movie. And I absolutely loved him as a kid. I was so stoked. He plays kind of a disillusioned military man. A lot of these people are disillusioned military people who are turning on the government because they feel like they've been left behind. But Howie Long still has a little bit of a conscience, much more so than John Travolta, which leads to them butting heads a little bit too, but it's an interesting dynamic because they work well together. This was probably the only movie I remember Howie Long being in other than the one where he's a fireman, and then after that firefighter movie, he went back to just doing Fox NFL Sunday. But this is probably his best performance in my opinion. Not saying it's great, but he's very good, and he's very imposing too. This was fresh after him retiring, so he's still jacked, got his military haircut. He looks like Duke from G.I. Joe. Like, he's so like Joe America in this movie. It's great. But really, really good one. And the term Broken Arrow is a fun term too. It refers to in military if you have one of your soldiers break off, broken arrow, blah, blah, or maybe they made it up. I don't know. All right, moving on to the next one. This one's kind of the sleeper hit of the bunch. You never hear anyone talk about this. It's actually one of Chris Evans' first movies. It has Jason Statham in it, but I don't believe Jason Statham's the main villain. And then William H. Macy rounding out the cast along with Kim Basinger. But Kim Basinger, even though it's a few years past LA Confidential, yeah, this is definitely one of those times where the aging Hollywood starlet, like, it came fast for Kim, but she's wonderful in it, and that movie is Cellular. So I like to call this the other side of the coin from the movie Phone Booth with Colin Farrell. That movie is all about one location, he's stuck in a phone booth, and he can't leave. This movie is the complete opposite. So Kim Basinger gets kidnapped by Jason Statham at the beginning of the movie. You don't know why. Her husband is blah, blah, blah. And so she's a scientist, though, and she manages to take a broken house phone and somehow hotwire it so it dials out to a random number, and that random number just so happens to be Chris Evans, and this is Chris Evans playing like a out of high school, early college age person. This is before Captain America, and it's right around when he did Fantastic Four. It's very, very similar, so it's very much cocky Chris Evans. Not that he's not, but, you know, not so much Chris Evans we have today. And I really enjoy him in it. But anyway, she gets on the line with him, and he's like, don't hang up on me. So the whole movie is based around the limitations of early 2000s cell phone technology. Things like, you know, losing reception and having to be tied and charging the phone. And there's this big conspiracy too, and I'm not going to get too much into it. It's going to unfurl the plot, but it's a very fun, action-paced movie. Jessica Biel has kind of a forgettable part in this as Chris Evans' ex-girlfriend, but Kim Basinger and Chris have wonderful chemistry, especially because they're never really on the line together. It evokes a little of that camaraderie between you know, John McClane and Al Powell and Die Hard, and Jason Statham is just really, really evil in this, and you don't typically get to see, like, this is before, I know he's done The Transporter, I want to say, by this movie, because I think it came out in 2004, but this was before he really started being a leading person, like, he is, before the Cranked movies, and it's just a lot of fun, a good, dumb, fun movie, and they play with the concept of being tied to a cellular phone, because if Kim Basinger hangs up, she might not get anyone. That's the reason. And so it's like, if he hangs up with her, he doesn't know where she is. I think she can't tell him her location. Maybe she's maybe she gets kidnapped. I can't remember. Like I said, I haven't seen the movie in a while. She can't just give him her address or something like that. He also doesn't quite believe her too. You know, he thinks she's pranking him. But yeah, good movie. All right, so this is the other one from the mid-2000s we're going to talk about. Now, Tom Cruise has had an interesting career. You would not believe it, but there in the early mid-2000s, it kind of felt like he was getting stale. You know, Minority Report was fantastic, but Mission Impossible 2 was not. He really seemed to be leaving the action genre alone, but the movie that I think really put him back on track, in my opinion, was Collateral. And it also just had the benefit of having Jamie Foxx, who up to this point was really, in my opinion, only known for In Living Color, became a very interesting, you know, straight man to his incredibly evil operator, which was, again, another fun twist. You didn't think that Tom Cruise would be a villain, and then Jamie Foxx, who's usually a funny man, is very serious in this movie. And what it takes place is Jamie Foxx is a taxi driver. Tom Cruise gets in there and says, hey, I have 4 stops to do today. I'll pay you a lot of money. Great, this is going to be wonderful. Jamie Foxx needs the money, but then the first stop, a guy gets thrown through the window to his death, and then that's when Jamie Foxx finds out, oh my god, you're a contract killer. And Tom Cruise is very laser focused in this, has this cool look with the slick back gray hair, and it's structured very video game like, as far as you have the 4 different stops, you have the different, I think it's 4 stops, like I said, I haven't seen these in a while. The 4 different stops, each one has its own theme. There's even a cool nightclub scene with a very catchy song that got stuck in my head when I was in college that I had to download the damn thing. And it's visceral, intense action. This is a lot of when the Bourne movies were starting to become big. This is before the Taken movies. This is also before the kind of, you know, what the John Wick, that kind of thing. So this, I want to say, is sort of the onus on that. When you see Tom Cruise take out these 2 guys early in the movie, right as he's about to go to the second stop, you know, it looks like he's about to get mugged, and Jamie Foxx is worried, and then he just takes out both of them in seconds. And it's like, oh my god, what have I gotten myself into? It's very good. It's very tense, heart-pumping, and a very, very fun action movie, and one of those ones that I think really revitalized Tom Cruise. Not that his career was going down, but it gave him new direction, because after this, then they came out with Mission Impossible 6 a couple years later, or 3 rather, Mission Impossible 3 a couple years later, which I didn't see. I had no interest in it. The first 2 were kind of, but hey, he's still making them to this year, and he even did Tropic Thunder and all that, which was fun. But yeah, Collateral, great movie. All right, getting down to the last 4 here. So one more. This will be the most recent movie. So this one's in the 2010s. I almost don't want to recommend this movie because I really dislike the director for reasons that have nothing to do with this movie. It's more about him setting, you know, the Star Wars off on a horrible tangent. But the movie we're going to talk about is Looper, which, yes, is directed by Rian Johnson, the guy who famously destroyed Luke Skywalker and whatnot, but the more you learn about that trilogy, you know, it was doomed from the beginning. But Looper is a very fun movie. It's a movie where in the future there is a big crime lords, like it's kind of like crime warlords, and they've discovered time travel. However, they've only discovered how to send people back in time. So you can't send them forward in time. And so how do you dispose of your enemies? Well, you send them back in time to be murdered. And that's kind of what they've done, is they've set up this criminal syndicate that will basically wait in a field in front of someone will get sent to them, they'll gun them down, and then that's it. However, the liability being that those assassins at some point, they might be used against them. So then what do? Eventually, they will send the assassin back to then be murdered by themselves. And that's kind of how you become retired as one of these people. Now, you don't know when it is, you don't know how long it's going to be, you just know that at one point, you'll end up killing yourself. And hence the plot. So early on, I'm not going to give spoilers, but this is all in the trailers. So early on, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who's phenomenal in this role, and they gave him some prosthetics to look him more like his older self, which is going to be Bruce Willis. He has one of his friends who has this happen to him and goes against the grain. And then you see the horrible consequences that can happen. So then shortly after that, he is given the same choice. However, when his choice comes, usually the guys have bags on their head, but when Bruce Willis gets there, there's no bag. And he manages to escape, and then that opens up the whole plot. Now, I'm not going to get too much into what happens. It really is best going into this movie blind, but right there, the premise is being, in the future, you will be sent back to be killed by your former self, and then what can happen is the people in the past can take your younger self and then influence that to make your older self come and get you. And if something happens, so let's say you get your finger cut off as your younger self, your older self then loses his finger and then remembers living life without a finger. So with these time travel concepts, it always gets a little wonky. That's where I say, you got to suspend disbelief a little bit, but they very cleverly handle the disbelief. And there is a light supernatural element to this too, because in the future, one of the warring factions is a guy that basically has telekinetic powers and is a big evil person. He's essentially the crime syndicate you're working for, which you don't really think is going to loop into the movie, but then it does in a very clever way. And that's where I'll leave it at that. That's a good one. That's the only one I'm recommending from the last, 15 years. So there you go. All right, last few here, and all three of these are going to be back in that sweet spot of the 90s. Now, you'll notice, and to this day, a lot of people say there's no female action movies, female action stars, but there are a few ones, and one of my favorite ones came out in 1995, and that is The Net, starring Sandra Bullock. So after Speed came out, Sandra Bullock was a hot commodity, and so they got her on board with this movie a couple years later. It petered out after that. After this, she did Miss Congeniality and Blindside and all that. But still, for this movie, it's fun. And it's very pertinent to today's climate. So this was something where back in the 90s, she was an IT person who didn't ever leave her house. She worked remotely. There was not much reason to do anything like that. Her mother has dementia, but not many people know her. And what happens in this movie is she gets sent a disc that has some powerful backdoor program, but then the guy that sent her the disc is killed. She's then goes off to Mexico to escape it, and she meets some guy who seduces her, who turns out to be the bad guy, and then blah blah blah. She runs away, falls in water, wakes up in a hospital, but then suddenly discovers that her whole life has been stolen. So someone's posing as her social security has been changed to some other lady who has a warrant out for her arrest, and now she has to use her technical know-how to figure out what the hell's going on, why is that disc so important, and what can she do to fix it, and also the added benefit of that no one knows who she is. So it's a believable premise too, because she's a homebody, doesn't leave, works remotely, her mother has dementia, so who's going to prove that they know her, other than maybe a few scattered ex-flames? And then it's like, how does that work out? Which apparently there's a sequel to this, and then there was a TV series that are related. I haven't seen any of those, but this is a fun movie. I watched this, when I say recently, maybe in the last 5 or 6 years with my wife, and she enjoyed it. And it is fun. Like, it's true, there are not many female-led action movies. Alien famously was not really Sigourney Weaver's movie until the midway point, which is part of the brilliance of it. But this is a fun movie and shows that the concept does work and does not rely, someone to go around punching dudes out. She uses her mind in very clever ways, and it's just a very fun, believable romp. And if you enjoy some old tech speak and some old internet, it's interesting to see how so much of this movie is true to today, but then so much of this movie is just so unbelievably different. But anyways, All right, last two we got here, and we're gonna have two more phenomenal action stars. If you noticed, I have not mentioned a repeat star. So we had a Jean-Claude movie, Kurt Russell movie, we had a Arnold movie. Well, there's also a Wesley Snipes movie that is not Blade, is not Passenger 57 or Demolition Man, and that is Drop Zone. I know, this was a movie that I saw in the movie store, and I thought, did they rename Passenger 57? If you don't know, there was a lot of times in the 80s and 90s where you would see a movie have alternate titles. I don't know why, but for instance, like Lionheart would be AWOL, or you would see this happen a lot with horror movies where they have multiple titles. And so when I saw Drop Zone in the rental store, I assumed it had to be Passenger 57. What do you mean? Wesley Snipes? Because like I said, the action stars would do genre films. You would do a plane film, a boat film, a car film. You wouldn't do two plane films. Well, technically it's not a plane film. Drop Zone is about skydiving, a lot of it. So in this movie, Wesley has a brother. They are transporting some criminal, and then a mid-air hijacking happens. His brother gets killed, and then when somehow Wesley survives, when he gets down there, everyone's like, "You're wrong. There's no way there could have been a hijacking. You can't get parachutes on board. Everyone's dead." Or not that they could have been wrong, but he was insistent that that they were alive. And they were saying, no, it's impossible. No one could get a parachute. The metal carbuncles would go off. And spoilers, yes, it actually did happen. Though that's because you know that they survived, but the way you find out how they survived is part of the fun plot. Other than that, there's not much to it. Somehow, there's a lot of contrivances to get Wesley back in a plane and then skydiving. He gets put to a desk job after his brother dies because they somehow blame him, but he manages to get himself, like, you'll notice this trope a lot where the hero gets a setback, unfairly so, but then climbs his way back, which is good. I enjoy this. It's something that I don't need my expectations subverted. So yes, he's getting in there. There's a lot of cool action shots. The cinematography is really interesting in this, with how they did the shots, and it's looped around an Independence Day parade, which it's always fun how they put these things in movies where they'll tie it to a holiday, kind of like how they had St. Patrick's Day in The Fugitive, or Independence Day in Drop Zone, or Christmas in Die Hard, but it doesn't make it those. Anyways, yeah, that's a trope. It's a trope to set these things around a major holiday without actually saying it's a movie that's like whatever. So in Drop Zone, it's just fun. It's a dumb fun movie. It's by no means Wesley Snipes' best movie, but with these, I'm trying to throw out some movies that you maybe have not heard of, and that's one that I forget about this movie all the time, but that still doesn't mean it's well worth watching. And if you want to see Wesley in his prime Blade physique, this was right around when that came out. And the last movie we're going to talk about right now, I did not mention Stallone yet, and this is one of my favorite Stallone movies. It's also, like I said, like around 96, 98, that's when all the good action movies stopped. I don't know why. Maybe there was something with the steroids, but that's when everything stopped, and it all started getting more cerebral. But this movie is called Daylight. So this is Stallone in Daylight. What this is there's it's an underwater tunnel. There's somehow like a robbery or something. A bomb goes off and it collapses the front and the back end of the tunnel, and then a bunch of civilians are trapped inside. Viggo Mortensen, of all people, is in this movie, and I can't remember it at all that he's in there. And Stallone isn't even in the tunnel at the beginning. He has to figure out how to get in there, and then relying on the engineering background, the blueprints, they got to escape. So it's a disaster movie. So it's not just like again, you have subgenres of an action movie. You can have an action thriller, action comedy, a disaster movie. This is disaster movie, kind of like Dante's Peak, Volcano, that kind of thing. And it's them trying to escape this collapsing tunnel as it's slowly but surely filling up with water, and it's sort of the kind of like the slasher film trope where as you progress through the movie, you start losing more of the survivors one by one until you eventually get to a climax, and then there's not really a big villain presence in this, but there is people who are disagreeing with what needs to be done, who then lead to bad scenarios. But it's just one of those things where it's fun to see. It's fun to see an action star in this kind of movie, because unlike other disaster movies where it's, you just have a normal person, having Stallone in a disaster movie makes it feel like the disaster's a little afraid of Stallone. Kind of like the Chuck Norris memes, like where the boogeyman's afraid of Chuck Norris, and it makes it enjoyable to see. I love these kind of stories too, where it plays on that visceral feel of being trapped in a room with the water filling up slowly and trying to escape from room to room as the water fills up slowly. And, it being not in an ocean setting or during a storm, but being in an underwater tunnel is just one of those things where, you drive through these kind of things. You go over a bridge, you do this and that. And so it plays on that fear that's always in the back of our heads while we're doing that. And then you get to see a whole fun action movie around it. But anyways, guys, that is what you got for this week. Let me know if you enjoyed this really drastically different formula. We'll get back to the games next week, don't worry. And I have bought a bunch of Switch games to talk about, some of the suggestions from you guys. But just as a reminder, hey, thank you all so much. Thank you all so much for being here every week. I am truly blessed to have every one of you. I hope you enjoyed this detour. Let me know what you thought, because I could talk action movies all the time too, and other movies. I love film in general. But yes, as always, I release a new video every Tuesday. It's been so nice getting a hold of you. Take care.